All right, everybody, welcome back to the #1 television program in the history of the entire universe. I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon, The Blackest Heart, and The Lonesome Crown, all three books published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. Today I'm going to be reviewing John Irving's newest novel, Queen Esther. Queen Esther. Just came out a week or so ago. I got it. I mean, I usually read a John Irving book whenever they come out, the week they come out. I mean, I've got my entire John Irving. We'll pan through my library here, and I'll show you my giant John Irving collection of books here. And they are all right there on that shelf right there. Got every single one of them except for, I think, the first three. I don't have the first three that he wrote. But anyway, we won't get into all that. Let's talk about this book. This book, Queen Esther, is kind of takes place in the same universe. Well, it does take place. It doesn't just kind of take place. It takes place in the exact same universe as the Cider House Rules book. So if you liked that book or movie, takes place in St. Cloud, Maine, and the orphanage that was made famous in The Cider House Rules by John Irving. Let's talk about the cover first, because you know I love graphic design and cover illustration. I really actually quite adore this cover a lot. I like the picture of the little orphan girl Esther here on the porch looking into the house. John Irving is a very literary writer. His stuff is deep. He talks about heavy subjects. And I think this cover does a good job of capturing just the sort of the loneliness of the orphanage and the loneliness of this young little girl and kind of the things that she goes through. And the warmth of the house that she's about to enter and the loving family that might await her inside of that house. So it starts off in New Hampshire, this book, with a family called the Winslows. They already have 4 young girls, Faith, Hope, Prudence, and Honor. Their father, he's into the classics. He runs kind of like a book club. He's kind of a teacher, and they talk a lot of quotes from Dickens, Charles Dickens in here. There's just a lot of literary quotes. I can tell that John Irving was probably having a lot of fun putting a lot of probably his love of the classics and injecting it into this book specifically through that character, the father of these girls. Now, the Winslows, even though they've got these 4 girls, they want to adopt another girl. They want to adopt a 5th. But the orphanage, I mean, they live in New Hampshire. The orphanage, now this book takes place between the years 1905 and 1981. So it's a sprawling epic. And John Irving does this a lot, where he will give us a story of different people throughout the ages. Like, I mean, the World According to Garp was like that. The Hotel New Hampshire was like that. Even Cider House Rules. It told the story of a vast period of time. He's known for that. And we're going to get into that a little bit more as I talk about this book. But the thing is this takes place a long time ago. And a journey from New Hampshire to Maine might not seem like that big a deal to us, but back then it was a big deal. And then so the orphanage that they want to get this girl from is in Maine, so they make a journey out there. And what happens is they come to the orphanage that was made famous in the Cider House Rules with the characters from that, and that's kind of where the story really starts about Esther. But before I get into the plot of what's going on with Esther and this family, I want to talk about more of the thematic elements that John Irving is in here, just like the Cider House Rules. Since this story is taking place in an orphanage and children being abandoned, a lot of the themes revolve around the discussions about abortion, the morals around that, surrounding that, both pro and con. I think that John Irving, as he did in the Cider House Rules, kind of has discussions. At least his characters have discussions of those things. They also there's a lot of politics of World War II that are thrown into here. There's a lot of politics of the Israeli-Palestine situation that goes back and back, because we're going to get into why these things are talked about a lot. And so it's kind of like this book speeds through. Not only does it speed through the life of Esther, this young orphan girl from the year 1905 to 1981, but it speeds through a lot of world history. And that would be the only drawback I have about the book, is it's a lot shorter than most John Irving books. And I think when John Irving goes on these big epic adventures through time, I like when he slows down and gives us a book that's about twice this size, because I think this is about half as big as most of his books. So I really felt like I was rushing through this. That's my only drawback. The literary quality of it was still top notch. But here's the plot of the story. Esther Knott, and I'm not saying her name, I don't know how to say Knott. It's spelled Nacht. Esther Knott was born in Vienna in 1905. Her father dies on board a ship sailing from Bremerhaven to Portland, Maine. And so she's left as an orphan. Now in St. Cloud, Maine, where this orphanage is, it's clear to Dr. Lark that he's the orphan director, that this abandoned child, Esther, not only knows that she is Jewish, but is also familiar with the biblical Queen Esther, from whence her name came from. She was given the name specifically out of the Bible, Queen Esther. And thus we get the history lessons on the Palestinian and Israeli conflict. We get history lessons on World War II. We're in an orphanage. We get history lessons on the entire history of abortion and all the laws that have passed and been unpassed and then passed again about abortion, the moral choices people make for abortion, against abortion. Now, I know that John Irving, I've listened to several of his interviews over the time on YouTube, and now he's a far left-leaning guy. I mean, you're going to get... and he's not really preaching to you his ideals in this book, but his characters. I mean, this book kind of reminded me a little bit of A Prayer for Owen Meany, which was clearly that in that book, the characters in that book hated Ronald Reagan. And there's even some shade thrown at Ronald Reagan even in this book. But I don't think it's as I mean, The Prayer for Owen Meany was a bit... I think that was his best-selling novel of all time, which surprised me. How do I know it's his best-selling novel of all time? Well, because it says it right here. The very final line of this thing was, his all-time best-selling novel in every language is A Prayer for Owen Meany. That surprised me, because I thought it would be like Cider House Rules or The Hotel New Hampshire or The World According to Garp, or any of the ones that got made into great movies. But anyway, that we got on an aside there. Just know that there are some politics thrown into this book. Now, the politics are spoken through the mouths and the dialogue of the characters. They're having discussions. This is a very realistic thing that happens in our world today. People have discussions about politics. They're sitting around the dinner table or talking to their friends or their coworkers or just anything. It happens. Don't get bent out of shape because these characters are having conversations on some pretty hot button topics about today that you find out stretch all the way back into time. So I know people don't like politics in their books, but you're going to get it here, and you just got to relax and just read it, you know. You can learn a lot. You can learn a lot. Anyways, so the young girl Esther gets adopted by the Winslows. And the basic plot of the story, beyond what I've told you, is she's extremely grateful that she got adopted. And her gratitude is unending as she travels. She traces her steps back to Vienna, where she was born, to learn about all of her lineage and ancestry and just, where she came from. And as someone who was adopted myself, I get that. You search for that. And if you saw my review of the Cider House Rules, where we also talked about the subjects of orphans and being adopted and abortion and things like that, I talked a lot about that in that. I talked a lot about my personal life in that review as well, when it comes to being a an a baby that's like unwanted, and what happens to the, all that kind of stuff. So anyway, as she travels, back to Vienna, and she lives her whole life. I mean, this book stretches. We get to see her whole life and that of her adopted family, and pretty much the history of the world. That's kind of what's going on in this. The only thing that I didn't like about this is I wish it was longer, like the rest of John Irving's books. That's pretty much it. So that being said, I'm going to give this about an 8.6, like an 8.6 out of 10 for John Irving. Wasn't my favorite. I mean, I've got a dozen of his books over there, if not more, like 15 or some odd books. This would probably, there's a lot of them over there that I like more than this. And I think I explained why.